If you want to change the world, what path do you take? Where do you go? Because if MIT and IIT and Harvard and Stanford were training people to change the world, you would have tens of thousands of people every single year coming out of these institutions changing the world. But that's not the case. You can't expect the world to look the same in 5 years as it does today. And we need education systems that also understand that we can't teach our kids things today, assuming the world is going to be the same tomorrow.
Thank you for joining the Transform Impossible, which is India's first emerging tech podcast. And today I'm really delighted to have with me Mr. Navid Nathoo, who's the co-founder of the Knowledge Society. He's developing unicorn people to solve the world's most important problems through exponential technologies. So Navid, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. So let's start, before we get into the Knowledge Society, let's talk about yourself. Who is Navid Nathoo? What's your purpose? And what excites you the most?
I believe that there is two important things in the world. The first one is there's a lot of unnecessary suffering. And the second one is there's a lot of undiscovered knowledge. And so I'm driven by those two purposes: unnecessary suffering and undiscovered knowledge. So for me, when I think about the purpose of my life and how I want to spend my time on the world in the world, is being able to reduce unnecessary suffering and being able to discover that undiscovered knowledge. And I think that on the suffering part, you're in Mumbai right now. You've seen a lot of poverty, a lot of inequality. And that is throughout the world, right? I've traveled in places and lived in villages from Bangladesh to East Africa to Central Asia, places like Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, just traveled all over the place and have seen the inequities and more importantly, the unnecessary suffering that's happening, whether due to lack of access to healthcare, hunger, clean water, whatever the case is, or even political injustice. And I think that all of these things, at least most of them, can be solved within the next 10 years if we have smart people working on them. Economics has incentivized smart people to go into job pathways that compensate really well, but don't add a lot of value to society. When you go get the best marks in school, go to IIT and get hired as a senior engineer at Google to work on ad optimization, that's not solving any big problem in the world. And there are a ton of smart people working at these places like Google, Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, who are getting paid a lot of money to make things like Snapchat filters or face filters or increase the optimization of ad targeting. But if you want to change the world, what path do you take? Where do you go? Because if MIT and IIT and Harvard and Stanford were training people to change the world, you would have tens of thousands of people every single year coming out of these institutions changing the world. But that's not the case. You have these heavily filtered set of people who happen to score really well on tests that get filtered throughout these systems. And it's just a large, filtering mechanism all the way from, early days in school. You take a bunch of tests, which are just more and more filters. And then eventually you go to university, which is another large filter. And then you go to a job, which in many cases is another filter. But then what? Okay, now you're in the real world. Your whole life you were trying to beat the game, play the system, get filtered. But what real skills did you develop? What real knowledge did you develop? What mindsets did you develop? What relationships did you develop? And I think that's the gap. Now, I'm not against filter systems. I'm not against that. What I'm against is confusing filtering systems with education systems. They're very different. Do education systems and filtering systems need to be paired together, or can we separate them?
I think it's not just smart people. I think everybody is economically driven, because I guess we're caught in the loop of the material world, and it's very difficult to free away from that. Yes, when you're looking at creating change that's bold, audacious, you need to have purpose. Now, it's a difficult path to choose, because that is a very rough path. Because there you're trying to tread your own path and you're not following, the natural way of moving ahead. So that comes with a lot of trials and tribulations. So most of the people try and avoid that part. But I hope that people realize that we have jumped into a world where I think in another 10 years, technology is going to create or bring us, the things that we call magic into the real world. So I'm excited about that. And I think that people need to understand that because of technology, because of internet, there's so much information and it's free. All that is lacking is a desire and intent. And if you have that, you too can create, billion-dollar businesses which touches and impacts a billion people. And you said very cool thing. I think what you said, that two of your purpose is taking away unnecessary suffering and look that undiscovered knowledge. And I think once we do that, I think the world will become really, really cool. So let's talk about the education system. At least here, the education system here in India is still stuck with the old age rote learning method. What, according to you, are the problems with the current education system? And is it imperative that we look at the education system with a future forward lens?
Yeah, I think the two things that control the world are education and media. And so when you look at these two main systems and how they're developed, both of them I think need a lot of work, because they will shape how people think, what they choose to do, the actions they take, the rest of their lives. And that the education system in particular is a system by definition, right? It is meant to have a large number of people go through and then kind of sort throughout the process for people to come out at the end. And then for us to say, okay, these people can go here, these people can go here, these people can go there. The root problem is two things. The first one is it's the one size fits all model. So we're assuming that all people are relatively the same, and therefore this system will work for everybody. I don't think that's true. I think that people are very different. Some people are extremely driven by making an impact. Some people are extremely curious. Some people are extremely social. Some people are extremely artistic. They're very different people at the core of their desire. And so I think we need to start building different types of systems for different types of people. Remove the one size fits all model and try to identify what are the buckets of people and how do you create optimal systems for the general buckets of people that exist. In any behemoth system that has been built, change is just difficult by definition. And so how do we create a system where you're designing adaptability within it? And I mean, these premises is what we designed TKS for, day one. We thought, okay, who are we actually building this program for? So we're not building this program for anybody. This program is not meant for everybody. For example, for students who don't have drive or desire, this program is not meant for them. And it's important because a lot of, let's say, students or parents might say, hey, how come you're not pushing our kids? Well, my response is this program was not designed to push your kids. This was designed to accelerate your kids. So if the student is already driven, we will take them to the moon. But if they're not driven, if they're expected to be handheld, if they're expecting, a school atmosphere, that's not what they're getting here. And that's similar to an accelerator like Y Combinator. And that's how we designed TKS, because again, it's not one size fits all. It's this fits this type of person. And then what we did is we built adaptability into it so that if, there's a big change with Ethereum, maybe they're moving from proof of work to proof of stake. Let's talk about that in the session tomorrow, or maybe there's a lot of stuff happening with decentralized finance. And maybe there's some cool stuff happening with Aave and the Polygon network and all of these cool things happening. Okay, let's talk about that tomorrow. Or maybe OpenAI does something in AI. And so we've built in a system where we're able to do that, where we're able to react very quickly off of the world. And that's important because the world is exponentially growing. So, 30 years ago, the amount of growth and the change of growth was much smaller than it is today, right? We are on this exponential curve. And so we can't expect the world to look the same in 5 years as it does today. And we need education systems that also understand that we can't teach our kids things today, assuming the world is going to be the same tomorrow. And we're already late, in my opinion. We've been teaching kids, the same thing for 50 years or 30 years. But when we started building those curriculums to what the world looks like today, there is a vast difference in the real world and what the textbooks and curriculums have been designed for. So it is about modernizing, being adaptable.
Right, true that. I think we are stuck with the old system in a modern time, right? So you mentioned that TKS is not for everyone. I definitely get that. But don't you feel that we are all capable of greatness? And I think we are soon getting into a world where technology is going to play a huge role. Now, the problem is that the narrative, I believe, is not right. We have got into an extremely competitive world where we need to handhold the vulnerable lot. If we desire to create an inclusive, a diverse world, so do you think that we can create a system where we handhold the vulnerable lot is my first question. And the second is the impact of pandemic. What has been the impact of pandemic on the education industry? Because if you see, the teaching force plus the students were pushed into the world, into the digital world, forced to adopt to online learning and teaching. So what is going to be the role of technology in that world is my second question.
I think everyone has the potential to make impact and do big things, but most people don't decide to use that potential. And that's the important part here. You can't force someone to want to study hard or to want to build projects or to want to use YouTube to learn versus to watch people play video games. And so what I've learned in the past 5 years running TKS and talking to thousands of really driven students from around the world is that not every student has equal potential. There are students that will go and become the next Elon Musk type people. And there are differentiators within those students. And the education system is not responsible for those internal innate differentiators. I really believe that there are some people who are just different. When I came into TKS, I thought, we could create a system and really level up everybody together because the system matters. And that's not the case. The system is one component, but the individual is another component. Their environment and family and culture is another component. So it does all work together. So the education system or any system, whether it's TKS, is not going to influence 100%. It's going to be a part of it, but then the student's going to be a part of it. Their environment's going to be a part of it. And it has to all work together. There's a lot of big issues with COVID and how we've treated it as a society. And on one side, the teachers are extremely burnt out. I've heard it over and over again that they're just trying to stay afloat, keep above water. They're struggling. Teachers are struggling. And I don't think they're being supported well at all. Teaching as a full-time job is very difficult, insanely difficult. And a lot of the times the compensation to reflect that doesn't align. On top of that, the teachers aren't being trained well in many parts of the world to adapt to this new era in online learning. So when you think about Zoom, a lot of teachers might know, okay, we have to go online with video chat. Let's use Google Hangouts or Zoom. Okay, but what do you do on Zoom? What are best practices? What are the features on Zoom that you can use? How do you use breakout rooms well? How do you take breaks? How do you create energizer activities? Do you do, a whole day of classes on Zoom, or do you separate it now with asynchronous learning and synchronous learning? And so there's lots of different things that we can train teachers on for best practices, but I don't think a lot of countries have trained their teachers well on how to adapt to an online learning atmosphere, and therefore the students don't have a great experience. Already being online is not a great experience. And then on top of that, the teachers aren't being trained well on how to do that. Then you have the infrastructure component. How many students across the world actually have good internet connection?
Right.
And it's surprising the number of people that do not have a good internet connection. A lot of students are being left behind. They might not have a laptop or a computer. It might be one computer per family. There might not be enough space in the household for students to actually do school because their parents are doing their job there and their other sisters over there. And it's difficult. It's so difficult. And so on one side of the spectrum, you have kids that can't even access these platforms. On another side, you have kids that are overusing platforms that are not beneficial for them. And I've seen it, right? I've seen kids spend 6 hours a day on Snapchat, and your phone tracks that. You can see it. It's not healthy. It's not healthy on both spectrums.
Right. Yeah, I think again you opened up too many things. It was first the digital divide. Still there are so many families who lack basic internet connection. Basic tablets or computer. Access to digital online learning. And yes, we've been thrusted into the world of information overload. And there is this fear of missing out. How do you funnel something that aligns with what you want to do? Is getting more and more confusing. I think augmented reality, virtual reality could play a huge role in educating. Once it matures, I think AR, VR will be a great tool for disseminating education. Now, what do you think could be the future of education, or the most compelling model according to you? Because you spelled out a couple of points which are not right. So what, according to you, could be the most compelling argument for the future of education? And then please do talk about the knowledge society.
And so it's funny because I run a education organization in emerging technologies in the future. But my belief is that the future of education and where we're actually going to move the needle is going back to the basics and teaching kids about the fundamentals, about what it means to be a good person, and having these good people, these mentors, these teachers help you in life. It's a human development journey, not an education journey. Not like, by education, I mean not learning about certain subjects like math and science. And so what we did at TKS is, even though we have a strong, focus on emerging technologies and sciences, because we believe that those are the tools that people can use to shape the future, we also train mindsets. And so every weekend during our sessions, we have mindsets of the week, and we train these mindsets. And we want to help young people get exposed to how to develop this thing over here, your brain. How do you develop the mindset of perspective taking, mindfulness, anti-fragility, stoicism, helpfulness, gratitude? All of these different pieces are so important, but get completely neglected in their day-to-day lives, because parents think, oh, they're going to learn it in school. School thinks, oh, their parents are going to teach them it. Religion does a good job at teaching a lot of core values, but a lot of people are becoming less and less religious the more and more science they start getting into. So you see this like correlation between like more scientific, less religion in general. Obviously there are cases where it's not the case, but in general, it's what we're seeing, this inverse correlation. So where are they learning about their humanity? Where are they learning about people skills and how they should think? You have this whole mental health, I would say, pandemic happening. This mental health stuff it could be worse. The amount of suffering that I've seen with anxiety, stress, depression is much larger than people think. Parents don't know that their kids are going through depression or have severe anxiety. People around the world have unnecessary stress, whether it comes to school grades or making their parents happy. I loved the Indian movie 3 Idiots. When it showed the guy in the engineering school kill himself because his parents would be upset at his grades or whatever the case was. It's insane that that's the world that we live in, right? That we value a piece of paper more than a person's life, or they value a mark on a piece of paper more than their life, or what people think of them more than their own life. And we have to go again back to the basics. That's what I fundamentally believe. So I think the future of education is understanding the basics and then start building the gaps right now.
I think you brought out something really important. I guess most of the parents, at least here in India, are in a constant race. They want their kids to excel, become doctors, engineers, or suddenly right now, because of technology, every parent wants their kids to become coders, not knowing that possibly like another a couple of decades, coding just could get irrelevant with like low code, no code, or what GPT at this point in time doing text to code. But yes, I think we are in a constant race of creating or pushing your kids, even at the cost of not seeing whether they are happy. So I think human development is the core of education. If you do not have a happy child, no matter what he learns, it will just be a complete waste of time. So talk a little bit more about the knowledge society. What's the current model right now? Is it virtual? Is it physical? Do talk about the pricing plans. Is it only for locals? Is it for global students? And why is it only limited for age group from 13 to 17?
Yeah, so TKS is a 10-month program with weekly sessions, and we have things that happen in our sessions and we have things that happen outside of our sessions. We built our own internal systems and platforms for kids to connect with each other and learn asynchronously outside the session. So it's almost like a flipped classroom model. Very, very interactive, not lecture-based at all, and structurally unstructured, which means that the students are creating their own journeys within the structure and bounds of TKS. So there's objectives they need to create, but we don't tell them how to complete those objectives in the sense of, whether you should do AI or blockchain or brain computer interface or nanotechnology. They kind of choose their path there. With COVID right now, everything is virtual because we're not allowed to do in person. But that being said, we've now developed this global community. We have students from India, from Singapore, from Korea, Ukraine, Mexico, Syria, Indonesia, all over the place, connecting with each other. And that has its own pros as well. And so now you have these kids from around the world connecting with each other, building projects with each other. And we actually did a project with the United Nations on how to get more young women and more young girls and women into the digital economy to increase their income and participate in the digital world. And so they were connecting with, a girl from Toronto having calls with girls from Vietnam on what's it like in Vietnam and how do we get those people into the digital economy, all the way from kids in Syria working with kids in other institutions in Rwanda trying to figure out this problem. So it's pretty amazing. And I would say when you kind of like step back for a second and you look at TKS, the first glance people think, okay, TKS is, a tech extracurricular, a STEM extracurricular. But then you look back a little bit more and you say, wait a second, it's more than that. Like STEM and tech is one part of it. This is really about a community of people. This is about building relationships and getting people from around the world to understand each other, build perspective, build friendships, potentially find their next co-founders and co-workers and best friends. Then you step back a little bit more and say, there's another component, which is the personal development of the individual, the focus on their mindset, their growth, their habit building, self-discipline, their personal goals and how they want to achieve them. And you have our directors working with these students one-on-ones in office hours, helping them figure out, how do you achieve your goals? And how do we help you, get rid of your unblockers and bad habits, whether it's spending too much time on Instagram or maybe your insecurities on what people think about you, and start unblocking that so you can, actually accelerate and move as fast as you can. And so when you actually look at TKS from the broadest picture, it is about accelerating the individual, a human accelerator. And we want to develop unicorn people that impact billions. And you're not going to develop these unicorn people just by teaching them technology, but you're also not going to develop them just by teaching mindset. You have to help them understand the future with emerging tech and sciences. You have to help them build that fundamental mindset, and you have to help them build real world skills to execute, while also building a healthy, positive, collaborative network to create that structure that everything can grow off of. Because if I've learned anything from TKS, people are everything. People are everything. People are not numbers. People have feelings. People have desires, emotions. They need friends. They need support systems. They need encouragement. And they need to be around people who are also driven, right? We are mimetic. We will do the things that our environment also does for the most part. We'll eventually mold to our environment. And so it's not about trying to fight our environment. It's about trying to be part of environments that align with who we are and who we're trying to be. And that's ultimately what TKS is. We are trying to create an environment for extremely driven, ambitious, curious students to excel.
Right, right. Wish you the very best for your journey. It sounds super, super exciting. You said that you're building something which is structurally unstructured. How cool is that? And you said it's a human accelerator which is building unicorn people. Now, that thought itself is so profound. If the other education industry ecosystem, they understand these and work on that, I think the entire innovation or ecosystem of the world will accelerate, because right now we are living with blinders. There is so much which blocks us rather than open us up. So I really wish you the very best for your journey onward. So you spoke about some projects that you did. Your school students did some projects for the UN. Would you like to share more of your projects, and what are the problems that TKS students have solved, which has really thrilled you?
So this is these are some of the submissions from the United Nations Challenge. And so, for example, if we look at one of them over here, these are the types of recommendations that they're providing to the UN. And as I scroll through, you can tell that this is not the work of an average 15-year-old student, right? It's not the work of an average high school kid. This looks like a McKinsey presentation. It looks like a professional deck. And that's because that's what we do. We train these kids on global high standards for consulting and strategy. And so they talk to real people. So this team actually talked to all of these people and talked about the pilots and the economics behind it, the financials, the locations, the execution plan, all of these things. And this deck was built by these 4 kids, for example, right? They're just, high school kids in TKS. What high school kids even have ever looked at kind of revenue, cost savings, capital structures, investments, And so we teach that in TKS. And this team was these 4 students over here. So you can see the level of quality that they're building. The other thing that I'll show you is our platform. So this is the platform that we've built out. It's called TKS Life. What you're looking at here is the activity page. And so you can see what students are doing in real time. Like just now, people are uploading these this work, these studies. And what I can do is I can filter by, let's say, articles on artificial intelligence. And now I can look at all the students who are creating, who are writing about their work in AI, right? Or if I want to look at projects, I can look at the different projects that they're creating in these areas. And you're looking at these titles and they're not normal things that high school kids would be working on, but it doesn't mean high school kids can't work on it. They're just not exposed to it, right? And so like heart attack predictions, probably an incredibly important problem in the world. How do we leverage data from things like our Apple Watch to do heart attack predictions? I think that's great. You can also give feedback. So in TKS, it's not really about commenting, but you can give feedback. So if students want to give feedback or suggestions, they can give that feedback to these students. We've also built something called Explore modules. And so this is how you can learn about all these different emerging technologies very, very quickly. So if you want to learn about gene editing, for example, you just start this module and you can look into all of these different areas within gene editing. right? Learn about deep genomics, sequencing, Illumina, epigenetics, all of these different areas pretty quickly. And so again, the information's out there, but now how do you package them into an easy way to learn? And we have tons of different subjects that students can learn into in their own time. So by the time they come into our sessions, they're collaborating. It's project-based. It's engaging. It's not just learning from someone at the front of the class teaching you. And then when we go to students, for example, so if I go back to this activity page and I go to this person's profile, I can schedule a brain date and meet them, have a jam session with them and talk to them. Or what I can do is I can look at their portfolio and I can see a little bit about them, who they are, what they care about. And I can also look at their portfolio and see what she's built, right? In this case, the student's Nyla, and I can see, the projects that she's worked on, right? Designing transparent and flexible solar cell, an oil cleanup system using aerogel and deep learning prediction models, her UN project. I can see videos that she's made. So you can see you can see her and what she's doing, right? And this is all intentional because we want to help these kids build portfolios, not resumes. Resumes say what you've done. Portfolios show what you've done and show what you're capable of. And that's really the future. It's portfolio building, not resume building. And so you can see all of these things that she's done, right? And then if you want, you can go to her LinkedIn. So we teach all these students how to build LinkedIn, how to create networks, right? So now she's networking with people. She's leveraging LinkedIn. She's connecting with people. And she also has Medium. And so she's writing. When she writes her articles and blog posts, you can go to her Medium and see all the different posts, right? So you can see all the different things that she's writing about here. And so these are the types of things that we teach the students, and the types of projects that they're working on at this age. And then it compounds. And when they're older, they start doing even more interesting things. So one of our alumni, Ben Nashman, raised $7 million for a company he just started called Synex Medical. And he's building medical device systems to detect blood metabolites non-invasively, including glucose levels. So no blood, no needle, none of that. It's using something called magnetic resonance. And he has an office in Boston now, an office in Toronto. He's managing a team of people. And I think he just turned like 20 or 21 years old.
Wow.
Right? So it's pretty incredible what these kids are doing. And this is still early in the journey, but it's because from a young age, they're building things, they're being exposed to the future. So that's all they know, right? They're not playing the game of competing against each other. They're collaborating with each other, growing with each other, learning with each other. And these are the types of results that you start seeing.
This is what I think the world needs. We should not create limiting beliefs. We need to push our students. And I think the best part, what you're doing is you're creating a lifelong journey. You're making them into problem-solving entrepreneurs, putting them into the world out there, placing them. And I guess that's the
one thing I've learned is that before you can make things better, you first want to look at what you need to stop doing or what we need to remove, because those things, those bad habits, the negative things usually outweigh the positive things. The image that I would kind of paint is, think of it as shackles and you're trying to run. So you can get better running shoes. You can go on a better track. You can, train your cardio. But if you have shackles on your feet, you're never going to be able to run as fast as you can. You're always going to have those shackles. And I think the same is true when we talk about individuals, when we talk about parents, when we talk about the education system. Before we even make things better, let's identify the shackles first, remove those shackles before you try to build on top of, the existing structure. As parents, some of the shackles that I would think about is the pressure and insecurities that your kids might have. How do you remove those things so they can run? Because if they're moving, but with those shackles, eventually when you're not there anymore, they're going to regress back, or they're going to stop, or they're going to fall down, right? As students, yeah, you could go and learn all of these things, but if you're on Instagram 10 hours a day, that's a problem. Or if you're competing with everyone around you rather than thinking about your personal growth, that's a shackle, right? It's not about looking at the person next to you and saying, am I doing better than them? It's about looking at yourself and saying, am I doing better than I was doing last week? And if you're every week doing better and better, you will far surpass everybody around you by nature. Compete against yourself, not other people. And in the education systems, rather than forcing the systems to change and be better, all we need to do first is start with the small pieces. What is broken right now? What are the shackles in the system? How do we just slowly weave off of that rather than trying to add more and more building blocks to this like leaning over tower that doesn't really have a strong structure right now? So how do we just look at those pieces? And it's easy to talk about all the problems and what could be better and how we need to change things. But I do think it's really important to focus on, what we need to just stop doing or the shackles that are holding us back so that we can rebuild that infrastructure so we can create a, larger tower and build off of that stronger infrastructure.
Right. What's the roadmap ahead for TKS and you? And do you have any plans to set up physical? Are you looking at India as a market opportunity?
We are. So we are looking at India. Right now, we're starting with the virtual program. So there's an insanely amount of driven students in India. It's blowing my mind. I'm looking at these interviews. I'm hearing what our directors are saying. I think India is an untapped market. I think it's going to surprise the world in the next 10 years. I have a strong feeling that we're going to see a lot of innovation in that part of the world, both in the blockchain cryptocurrency space, in biotech, and in AI. So I think that India has a lot of potential, and the world right now is too heavily focused on China and America. But I think India is kind of the black swan, is the country that's going to really surprise people and take a big leadership position in these areas. I think there's a lot of things holding India back, like the culture of India, things like the caste system,
right.
How people even think about each other. I think there's a lot of those cultural aspects that will get out of as more and more people are connected to the internet, as they grow, as they learn more about other societal cultural norms around the world, pluralism, diversity, all of those things. But I think India is a big market. And right now, if parents or kids are listening to this and want to get involved, our virtual program is the starting point. So I would apply to our global virtual program. It's totally remote. It accommodates for different time zones. And then once, this COVID issue has been dealt with and we're able to get in person again, we're going to be looking at creating some strong on-ground partnerships to create those physical programs in different parts of India, from Bangalore, Mumbai, Delhi, things like that.
Lovely. Navid, thank you for being part of the Transform Impossible podcast. And I wish you set up over here in India. And I think the education industry is completely getting overhauled. Like you said, India is a country where people are now opening up because of internet and connectivity and breaking away from the norms. And to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, please press the subscribe button. Until next time, see you guys. Bye-bye. Thank you.